Hey, my name's Hunter Harrison, and the name of my company is Hunter Photographic. I do these videos from time to time when I see questions that I think I could be of some assistance with. I've done one on how to make a styling board and how to safely ship film in the past. And lately I've seen a lot of questions about metering, why you would want to use an external meter, how to use an external meter, how to meter for film. So if you're interested in getting into film photography and you don't understand how the metering maybe works differently, or you're interested in picking up an external meter, I think this video could be of a lot of assistance. The first thing I'll say is that I happen to use a Sekonic L358. These aren't made anymore, but they were just recently discontinued, and they're darn near bulletproof. I love this meter. Best $250 I've spent. I've dropped it off of a high balcony and it survived. So you can find these for about $250. Maybe check keh.com. I think they always have some for sale. So that's my external meter. We'll talk a little bit about how this meter works differently than the meters built into your camera. We're also going to talk about how I meter for film and a little bit about how I meter for digital. So the first thing I would say about the meter that's built into just about every camera, this is my Contax, it has a built-in meter as well, is that these work off of the reflective meter principle. So what does that mean? Well, let's say that you have a bride and groom in open shade and they're both in the same lighting. If I take this camera or any camera and point it at the groom in the black suit, it's going to attempt to make that black suit appear middle gray, so it's going to overexpose. If I then point the same camera, same settings, at the bride in the white dress, it's going to try to make that white dress appear middle gray, so it's going to underexpose. So in essence, given the same lighting situation, you're going to get two different readings, and that's not so great. That's where an external meter comes in. An external meter is an incident meter. It doesn't measure the light reflecting off of an object, it measures the light falling onto it. So this little white dome is the meter itself, and when I put it near the groom in the black suit or the bride in the white dress, as long as they're in the same lighting situation, it's going to give me the same reading. It has nothing to do with what people are wearing, what their skin tone is, what the background looks like, because it's working off of light falling onto them, not light reflecting off of them. That's why you want to use an external meter. I originally bought this to use for film, but once I got it, I knew immediately it was giving me great results for film and digital. This also works for flash. I use it in all three situations. In essence, I don't shoot without this thing. So definitely a worthwhile investment. Strongly suggest you get one. So how would you use this in combination with shooting with film? Well, the first thing to know is that film generally hates underexposure. And depending on the film stock, people will build in different amounts of overexposure. For me, I happen to shoot both Fuji 400H and Portra 400 as though it's ISO 200. That's a full stop of overexposure built in. Other photographers wouldn't do this, or they would do it differently, and those ways are right for them. This is just how I do it. So let's say we're working with Portra 400, and I want to treat it as though it's ISO 200, or building in that extra stop. Well, what I do is I set the ISO on my meter for 200, and then I also shoot in manual mode, and let's say that I want to shoot at 2.0. So I've got that set on my camera. And I set this for 2.0 by just doing a little dial right here on the side, so that's 2.0. And then, because it's film, I want to build in a lot of overexposure. So for me, I retract the bulb that's on here. There's a little dial here, it goes in and out. So I retract that. That gives me about another third of a stop of overexposure. Now lastly, I'm sitting by this big window in my office for a very specific reason. I'm sure you can see the highlight side of my face and the shadow side of my face. And you may have heard the term metering for the shadows. Let me show you what that is. I take my meter, I put it in the shadows, and that's where I take my meter reading from. In fact, I just took the reading and I've got ISO 200, f2 and 1/30th of a second. So now on my camera, I set this for 1/30th and I'm good to go. So one thing you note is that I didn't set the ISO on the camera. It doesn't matter. This sets the sensitivity. That's all. Now I can set the ISO on here, and that all that does is tell the meter on the camera how to behave. But I'm not using the meter on the camera. I'm using this. So the ISO setting on a film camera really makes no difference as long as you're using an external meter. So that's film. How is digital different? Well, digital doesn't like overexposure. Generally, general principle is you want to protect those highlights. So how would I meter differently? Well, first of all, I do need to set the ISO on the camera. So in this case, we're going to set it also for 200. So I've got that set right here. And then this is set for 200 still. We're going to shoot at f2. So let me make sure that's plugged in here. Got that set. Now we want to get rid of the overexposure I built in by retracting the bulb. So we're going to meter with the bulb out this time. And lastly, I'm not going to necessarily meter from the shadow side. In this mixed lighting situation, I'm going to meter from the highlight side. If I'm backlit, I would still meter from the shadow side. So whatever's facing the camera. And that gives me a reading of 1/125th of a second. So I would set my shutter speed accordingly and shoot away. That's it. That's really how I do my metering. I think the only other really important thing to mention is that you always want to point an incident meter like this generally towards the camera. In some situations with digital, you'll more towards where the light is coming from, especially in side lit situations. But for the most part, especially with film, you're going to always point this towards the camera. I've seen some people say that you put it next to your subject like this and point it towards them. That's wrong, and I can show you why. This now says 1/60th of a second. That's a full stop of overexposure, whereas if I pointed it in the right direction, I get, again, that 1/125th of a second. So that's really how to use the external meter and how to use it for film and digital. I think the one other thing worth noting is kind of a safety net thing. What happens if the battery burns out on this or you forget it at home? I've only forgotten this once, and I happen to know a little trick to save myself, and it's a way of making the reflective meter in here behave as though it's an incident meter. You know, you ever heard of a gray card? You point the camera at the gray card, it gives you a consistent meter reading using a reflective meter. Same principle, but let's say I still don't have a gray card. Well, I still have my hand with me. You ever notice how your hand the palm of your hand never tans? It's always with you. Well, the proper exposure reading for your typical Caucasian hand is one stop overexposed. So you put this where you want to take your meter reading. With your other hand, you point your camera and fill the viewfinder, and then adjust your settings until the meter inside of here reads one stop overexposed. Play around with it because everybody's hand is a little bit different, different shades, etc. Mine happens to work out great with one stop of overexposure. So if you are to ever forget your external meter and you have to rely on what's built into your camera, just treat your hand like a gray card and you're generally good to go. So that's it. I'll upload this video to YouTube. You can find other videos on YouTube. I think my channel is just simply Hunter Photographic. And of course, I'm always around if you want to ask questions. Thanks much.